How's it going?
That's good. How are you today, Chris?
Wonderful, wonderful. So, always started off. Can you tell me a little bit about yourself, your background, what your expertise is? Because that's pretty much what we bring people on here. People who are an experts in a specific field.
I was born and raised right here in LA, California, Los Angeles.
Me too.
Um, I've been in law enforcement. I was there for 32 years. Started off obviously in a small department, Compton, and worked the streets. Worked
Small
gangs.
department, big problems.
Small department, big problems. Yeah, everybody knew about Compton. I used to start it off all the time. You might have heard of the city where I come from. It's called Compton, but worked gangs. Was on a task force. Was on the SWAT team. I call it all the cool cop stuff. I had a lot of fun. And around 2000, Compton PD was absorbed into the LA County Sheriff's Department. And that's where I've been since 2000. And during that time, I had the opportunity to kind of do some things that were a little bit different that, a large department gives you those opportunities. I worked at a youth center for many years. I taught Get Real About Violence. I taught the DARE and SANE programs, which is all about, drug abuse, and basically wrote curriculums for character development for junior high and high school courses. Worked patrol again. I worked internal affairs for several years. I worked in custody. I worked in courts. I worked in audit and accountability bureau, and did a lot of risk management stuff towards the latter part of my career. And I finished my career as a chief over in LA County probation. So really kind of got into the juvenile youth processes and things, and kind of the institutional stuff dealing with probation. So I have a pretty well-rounded career.
Yeah, I mean, listening to it actually right now, I'm wondering how that transition was. Before we jump into some of the more nuanced topics that relate to what this podcast is, I want to ask a couple questions because now you got my interest.
Absolutely.
What was the one question I have? What was it like in terms of the absorption of being absorbed into LAPD, correct?
LA Sheriff's Department.
Yeah, it got absorbed in. Was it LAPD before absorbed into the LA Sheriff's Department?
No, so it was Compton Police Department. They had their own municipal
division.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And when what was that transition like for you?
Whew. It was challenging. It was not something that the members of the department wanted at the time. It was a political thing that the mayor of Compton was pushing. It turned out to be some questionable motives, so we weren't happy about it, but it probably ended up being one of the best things that could have happened to me personally and to many of my peers. So those first couple of years, it was a bit tenuous. We weren't welcomed into the sheriff's department based on kind of like the contract that we received. It was favorable for us, and I was fortunate enough to meet with somebody who had gone through something similar a couple of years earlier. And had I not met with this guy, his name is Chief Roy Pugh, rest in peace, the one thing that he told me was, turn the page. You can't control what happened. Turn the page, which is what I did. And it really helped boost and elevate me continuing forward with my career.
Yeah, because a lot of times people essentially, how I read that is people who get stuck into the way things were. And the rest of their career is spent complaining or griping or stuck in resentment about the way things used to be. And the reality is they are the way they are. And you kind of got to roll and move forward and figure out how to evolve and grow based on the ongoing changes in the system.
Absolutely. I had a lot of my friends that did just that. They got stuck.
Yeah. And never grew in, I'm sure they didn't grow in their careers as well because they couldn't evolve based on the times. One more before we jump into it, but I have to ask, what was the transition like going into internal affairs? Because but public perception of that for a police officer, ex-police officer, I'm at that time when you're transitioning into internal affairs, my perception of that always is it's basically like you've basically gone against the crown at this point. It is very much, hearing you say that, I was like, this is going to be interesting because it's very much like you can't do that. You've crossed over. You've joined a different team. It's us versus them mentality. So I'm curious what that transition was like for you and how you manage also to maintain like the relationships that you had built over the course of your career still throughout that process.
It was interesting. There were people that warned me about going there. There were people that I considered friends and colleagues that even after I arrived there, I would tell them, hey, it's a great assignment. You might want to come here. They're like, nope, hands off. We're not doing it. But for me, it was the ability to learn something new. It was to see another aspect of the department. It was to gain a different level of experience. One of the things that I was fortunate enough to do in my career is every kind of 2.5, 3, 4 years at the most, I would move. And, whereas early in my career, I worked gangs. I loved it. There are people that they work gangs as a deputy. They make sergeant. They want to go back and work gangs again. They make lieutenant. They want to go back and work gangs. And what I wanted to be was well-rounded. I wanted to learn as much about the department, about the organization, and about law enforcement as I could. And it was challenging. And the department doesn't do a great job at making that okay. So you have your partners and you have your line level people that are there saying, hey, man, so you're going after people now. No, I'm not. Really, all I'm doing is my job. I'm doing investigations. And when I tell you, Chris, if there's an A to Z, somebody on the department did it.
Yeah.
But it really gives you a deep inner view into the department and how things work.
Yeah, no, it's while you're talking, my brain is going over like just what you explained, what your career's been, and even all the things that make up the department and all that, and what's the word, ancillary services that surround the department, CPS, DHS, probation, all this, and those are all, I can't say they're divisions, but you basically intertwine and cross over in all of these various different sectors. And I think oftentimes, like when you think of police work, there's like a very myopic view, patrol, gangs, SWAT. It's usually something that is perceived with force, when like actually a lot of the time, majority of the calls that you guys are getting aren't really those calls, correct?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So in terms of like the work, like what makes this work personal for you?
First and foremost, I think a number of things. One is, growing up here in Los Angeles, my family's here. I've had negative experiences with law enforcement, myself, both before getting on the job and even during my time on the job. And we can get into that a little bit more if you like, but the reality of it is that I have seen law enforcement from the inside. I've also seen it on the other side. And let's just be real. I'm a black man, grew up in LA, and I had dealings with LAPD and different agencies. So that's number one, and the one thing that I learned in talking to people is that if a person is out there doing something that is against the law, they're not so mad that you caught them. They're not so mad that they may even be in jail. They're mad because we disrespect them. They're mad because we dehumanize them. They're mad because we don't treat them with common human decency. And so that's one. Other thing is, I have family members, that have suffered from mental health. I have family members that have suffered from, substance abuse for many, many years. I have a cousin that was actually killed by law enforcement. And at the time when it happened, I didn't really think about it. But years later, as I grew, as I evolved, as I learned a lot more, I can say that based on the set of circumstances, he might have been in a mental health crisis at the time that happened. And along with that, he may very well have also been under the influence of something. So, it's at home. It touches home. And if you pay attention here in this world today, some of our friends, family members, they're suffering. You know what I mean? And they're going through things that oftentimes they don't even tell us about. And so the last thing I'll tell you is that I attended the FBI National Academy in 2016. And I signed up for this class called Dealing with Difficult Employees. You know, that was one of the classes. It was highly recommended. So, you know, you think you're going to get in there, you're going to deal with employees that are dealing with, you know, attitude problems that are, you know, antisocial or things like that. And the instructor from the FBI, what we found out was that the class was all about recovery and substance abuse. And he actually told us, he says, the reason I titled the class the way I did is because if I told you what it was about, you wouldn't sign up for that. And so what happens when you go to FBI National Academy,
the stigma is real.
The stigma 100%. Is real. And, you know, when you go there, you enroll in college courses is what it is, you know, through the University of Virginia. You can take, you know, bachelor level or graduate level courses. And so he says, if I titled it correctly, most people wouldn't probably sign up for this class. But one of the things he did, the first assignment was write how substance abuse has impacted your life. We all had to go spend the time over the weekend, come back, you know, with a paper, and we had to talk about it. And it was eye-opening to me to see how many people in that class talked about personal experiences. And these are people that you're sitting right across from that you never know what they've gone through in their life. You never know what they've experienced. You never know what demons they're battling. So that was eye-opening. That was another level of kind of shedding some light. And so it was just, it was something that I wanted to be a part of. It was something that I wanted to be, I wanted to contribute to. We actually got to go to an AA meeting, was part of the course, part of the class.
Interesting.
Yeah. And it was just, I knew it was something that needed our attention.
Yeah. That's wild. They set up an AA meeting for you guys to go to within the context of that system. Yes. It's actually cool. It's interesting too, because I think when you even think about law enforcement, you don't think about substance abuse, but like the data on alcoholism, especially in the police force and fire department, like public service roles, is absolutely through the roof.
It is.
And it's because I think have you ever heard of a thing called 7-year syndrome?
Not in the way that you're talking about it, I don't think, but
so when I was in UCLA, I was in criminology psychology class. I forget what the name of it was, but it's criminology and psychology. And there's a thing called 7-year syndrome in the police force, basically, where most police officers who start basically they step into this work because they want to help people. Like there is an idealistic view of what this work is, like a kid who's like, one day I want to be a cop, I want to be a firefighter. And then they get into the work, and a lot of times they're like, oh shit, this isn't what I thought this was going to be. We think we're going to help people, but you're out on substantial crisis calls you guys aren't necessarily always equipped to deal with. This person's pissed off at you. And what it would do, a lot of these people around 7 years, they started to recoil from their peer groups outside of the police force. They would only hang out with other police officers. They would only surround themselves because everyone else didn't understand what their plight was, and didn't understand what they really had to deal with. And you would actually see a rise in alcoholism, rise actually in suicide as well too. And I think it's one of these things where when we think about it, I think oftentimes, you know, at one point in my life, and there was a time probably when I had pride with it, but I've been sober 17 years. I was like a criminal, but like enjoyed being a criminal. Right. There would been no way we would have been having a cordial conversation, you know, right now. And being an adult who pays taxes, I'm like, thank God for the police. Like I understand when everything happened in 2020, stuff like that. I'm like, you guys don't understand how much adoration and respect I have. Also, my mom was schizophrenic. She was in and out of mental hospitals. I always used to joke, I thought our address was 5150. I was born and raised, I was LA, Queen of Angels Hospital. Okay. So I get it. But I just think a lot of times when we think about police officers, it's like there's no room for your mental health. Or we don't care what mental health or substance abuse problems you have. Like, suck it up. Your job's to protect people, right? You know? So it's interesting when you were talking about that right now. In terms of the various different roles that you've had within law enforcement and public service, How have you seen how crises have been handled differently over the course of your career, in various different roles too?
Yes, yes. Of course, it's evolved. But if I have to be honest, it's been a forced evolution.
Yeah.
It is law enforcement is antiquated in their mindset as a whole. There are some great, people out there that are forward thinking and trying to do some great things, but the institution as a whole is a little forced. I mean, you have to force it to change, and that force typically comes from the public outcry, incidents. So yes, I've seen it evolve. I remember when I first got on in the early 90s, especially in Compton, just to give you an example, PCP was a big thing back then.
Sure.
And everybody knew that, hey, there's this superhuman strength. They don't feel any pain, and the mindset was and I'm just being real, you almost got to beat them in a submission. You know what I mean? And it takes 10 people to jump on them because they're so strong in this. And then we started learning more and more about it. And this was early on in my career when I remember somebody, and I remember it was a class that I took, and I couldn't tell you where or what, but what they said is that PCP slows down the brain, the central nervous system, and the thought processes. So if I tell you to do something, you're not going to do it. And it's going to seem like you're being non-compliant, but just give it time. And I'm telling you, I just remember one day standing there, and there was this guy walking in the middle of the street. Cars are dodging, going around him, and he's got the stare, and we almost call it the Frankenstein walk. And so, my partner and I pulled over, and we started talking to him, and he said, "Hey, come over here out of the street." Right? And so he slowly walks over because he sees the flashing lights. I think he's coming towards that anyway. So we're trying to tell him, step up on the curb. "Hey, what's your name?" And I remember telling my partner, I said, "Hey, just slow down for a minute." And literally probably about 90 seconds to 2 minutes, he did everything we told him in the order we told him to.
It just wasn't in a
He stepped up on the curb.
Yep.
He said his name was John. He started answering questions. So it was like, okay, we have to slow down. You can't go fast. And that reminds me of the way things are coming along now, kind of like with mental health and substance abuse. We have to slow down. We have to try to evaluate, what it is that a person is going through. And it's funny, I'm going to digress just a little bit. For years, we've had what we call drug recognition experts, DREs. And you went through a lot of courses and training to become a DRE so that you could arrest people and be able to testify in court about what the symptoms that you observe, be it the pinpoint, eyes, the rapid pulse. But it was just to make the arrest.
Yeah, it's basically your version of documentation. Can you elaborate what a DRE is, like a general explanation, just so everyone understands? Because I've never even heard that.
Okay, so it's called a drug recognition expert. So, as a police officer, you're given some basic training on how to recognize the symptoms of being under the influence of alcohol, how to recognize the symptoms of being under the influence of, red watery eyes, slurred speech, staggered gait. These are all the things that you learn how to write into a report. But a drug recognition expert, because you don't smell the odor of alcohol, has been trained to be able to identify and use his expertise or her expertise on how to make an arrest based on symptoms, be it your eyes, be it your speech, be it the pulse, without smelling any alcohol. So remember, alcohol is one thing, right? We can smell it, right? And there's things, cocaine, heroin, methamphetamine, they all have different symptoms. Well, a DRE is somebody that can actually make an arrest without any possession because they can testify to those symptoms based on the extended amount of training that they have. That's what we call a DRE. So what would happen is you might have one DRE on a shift. So if I came in contact with somebody, I'm not trained, I might say, "Hey, send me, John, who's a DRE." They come over, they do the evaluation, I write it in my report, and it gives you probable cause to make the arrest. That's pretty much what a DRE is.
Interesting. Was that effective? Was that an effective strategy in the force?
I will say this. It's effective in the sense of getting a person that can't care for themselves or is under the influence off the street. Is it effective for that person in terms of as soon as they get released? Did they get any treatment? Did they get any services? No. No, to be honest with you.
Yeah. No, it makes sense. It makes sense to me because I think it sounds to me in some respects, I might get flack a little bit for this, but like therapist, a lot of, even when we come down to diagnosis, it's very subjective, you know, and just because we diagnose you doesn't necessarily mean, hey, you're going to get the appropriate treatment. Is the diagnosis even correct sometimes? So when I hear it, I was like, oh, okay, interesting. But at the end of the day, we have the tools we have, you know, to try to essentially get people the services that they need to kind of get where they need to be. What are some of the tools that you think that are like needed that maybe didn't exist 10 or 20 years ago, like, you know, in the field?
There's two big ones, if you ask me. One is just education. You know, they give us this belt with all this stuff on it. Handcuffs, baton, you know, OC spray, a gun, extra bullets. Now we carry tourniquets and tasers, and we just keep adding all of these tools onto our belt. But it doesn't necessarily teach you compassion. It doesn't necessarily teach you patience, especially if you come into an organization that's not supported. So I think education, the more people are educated about anything, I believe, it gives them better decision making. And this is just, you know, what I truly believe and what's worked for me. The more I know about something, the more I can understand it. And the more I can understand it, the more I can feel for what it goes into being in whatever that certain set of circumstances or situation is. So education is one. Two, I think it really takes a strong leader to set the expectation that this is what I expect. It's got to be the norm, not the exception. And the department has to go in a direction where it's supported. You know, we go through so much training, Chris, that is mandated. And this is what the training is like. Okay, hey guys, you know, the state said we got to do this training. Hey, read this handout. We're gonna do a quiz on it in a minute, and we're gonna try to get you out of here so we could beat traffic. If there's no commitment, right?
Yeah,
to the information.
The messaging is this is nonsense. Hey guys, we just have to do this to check off the box.
Right.
It's not really necessary.
That's part.
Here you go. Like, just make sure you get it done. We all did it, right?
Right. And if you don't believe it, and I'm a young officer, and you're the senior trainer, the advanced officer training guy, and this is the way you're presenting it to me, how am I going to absorb that?
Yeah.
You know. And what I have noticed is that it's the people that have personal experiences in their lives that get it.
Yep.
They're the ones that get it, and they're the ones that can shake off like, hey, you may not be taking this training seriously, but I am.
Yeah. It's just, I always find it interesting when like it rarely happens now, but I was just at a conference last week where people don't have sympathy for substance abuse, alcoholism, or mental health issues. Like almost like there's an old saying, adage we used to use called an immigrant mentality. What an immigrant mentality essentially is, in terms of like the loose made up definition, is like someone who basically moves here and whatever their emotional state, if they were an alcoholic, they drop everything and figure it out because the pressure of immigrating to a new place forces them to develop new skills that like they normally wouldn't be able to muster up because there's so much stress, so much pressure. But I think there's still, I think the climate has shifted, but there is still like some of it where there's times where people like just have like no insight and no compassion
Right.
in some respects for that. It really, I find it shocking. I feel like that I've had those experiences too with some like old school officers when my mom was schizophrenic.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like when because I'm like I said, they were at my house all the time, and it'd be like, oh, they don't like get like she's clearly yelling at the fire department, pulling down her pants in front of them. You know what I mean?
Right.
And didn't understand that. So I understand when you're talking about that, like how frequently do you feel like you come across that in the force? Like the lack of understanding for the mental health or substance abuse crisis that's going on with the people that they're working with?
It's still very, very frequent. Just to tell you that, with the sheriff's department where it's different than LAPD or Gardena PD or, Hawthorne PD.
Smaller.
Those are all smaller, but the sheriff department also runs the jails. All of those places have a small station jail, but they pretty much transfer their people into the county jail system. So right now, sadly, it's estimated that the LA County jail system is the largest mental health hospital in the country.
I've heard this.
Right.
Yeah. And unfortunately I've been there, so I can attest to it. It was 18 years ago.
Yeah.
But it was not it very much.
It's not kind.
It's not kind. It is. I've had friends who were in state prison who said LA County Jail is worse than being in California State Prison. And California State Prison is notorious for how gnarly California prisons are nationally. So if you think about it from the sense of hardened criminals going, hey, LA County politics just internally, and then on top of it, the guys who are basically struggling with mental illness, there isn't. I wholeheartedly agree. Yeah, I remember that was like I think orange was the color for the people who were mentally ill. I don't remember, orange or yellow.
Yeah, orange, yellow, brown, blue. I mean, you name it.
Depending on what the issue is.
But if you ask me, kind of blue, which is our general population, probably has a lot of people dealing with mental health issues. They're just not the acute, because we have step downs. But to your point is that there are a lot of deputy sheriffs that understand it, pay attention to it. They're probably the ones that are working in it on a daily basis, maybe on some of the what we call high observation floors. And so they're getting more exposure, they're getting more education. But overall, it's a topic of discussion within the department. There is some mandatory training that we're going through. But I'd have to say, until you change a culture, you won't change the mindset of the majority.
Well, there's something you said right now, and there was almost the way you said it made me formulate this question. But like, how long is something a topic of conversation before actually change is enacted within these departments? I think that's part of the reason. I think that's a lot of what you're talking about right now. I'm sure a lot of things that needed to be changed over the course of your entire career, you were probably having a lot. They were a topic of conversation. How long do you think often it takes for these changes to kind of be implemented within the context of those systems?
It really depends, again, like on the leadership. And to be quite honest with you, the leadership, this current administration and the one before that, they weren't interested in, I don't think, making change for the good. They're interested in either one, all about supporting the deputies, which they need support.
100%.
Two, like the current administration, it's just about keeping things quiet. If I can keep the attention off of us, everything will be okay. But being quiet is not being successful. So to your point, it really depends on how important it is to the person running any organization. It's like anything. How fast can you affect change if you're the decision maker? Pretty quick. Sure, there's red tape, there's bureaucracy, it takes time. In a county system, you have to go through these vendor approval processes and RFPs and all that kind of stuff. But the reality of it is that if you want it, you can make it happen. But again, I go back to this. If you're being told to do it and you're being forced to do it, maybe by outside oversight or by just public outcry or even by legislation, it's like anything. You're pretty much going to drag your feet. And you're going to get it done because you have to. You're going to check the box because you have to. But are you really taking those extra steps for effectiveness or are you just taking the steps that are mandated, which are usually low level?
Uh-huh.
The
Enough,
minimum requirements.
yeah, enough to keep the federal government off our back, or the state, or whoever's funding certain aspects. That's what I think you're talking
Yes.
about. We need to jump through enough hopes, and let's go back to business as usual. We don't want. That's what I feel like you're talking about. Correct?
That's a great way to put it.
How much are in terms of like your guys' work? Because I actually don't know this. I know like outcomes is like a huge thing now. Data. Like how much are outcomes even considered in terms of like reoffending, incarceration? Like what does that even look like nowadays within the department?
So just to be clear, are you asking how much attention does the department pay into that, or how much do we track it?
Both. I think
Okay.
I'm asking both how that's tracked. What is considered a successful outcome? It's good counter question, because I think it's a jumbled, nuanced question, to be
Right.
frank too.
So, the department tracks an enormous amount of data. The majority of that data is pushed forward towards like DOJ, towards the federal government, Department of Justice, that track stops, arrests, contacts, mental health. Within the sheriff's department, I can say this, that if you come back into our custody, heaven forbid, we're not going to have that happen, right? Yeah. We can look at it and say, okay, how many times has Chris been here?
Yep.
And where was he last time he was here? What was he here for? We can track all of that. Are we asking the question, why is he back? No. We're not tracking why you're back.
Yeah,
We're not
yeah.
tracking what happened. We're not tracking, is there some way that we could have helped prevent this? You know what I mean? Is there an
Intervene.
alternative? We're not tracking that. We are taking, and remember, LA County Sheriff's Department is the one agency, right? You have 50-something odd other municipal agencies that are feeding people into just our
System.
custody, our system. So in a lot of ways, all we're there to do is house, feed, secure, move to court, bring them back, house, feed, secure, move to court, wait for the court to tell us what to do with this person, what not to do with them.
Whether they're kicked out or they're going up
Right.
further, upstream further. It's really like you guys are really, for lack of a better way of saying it, maybe a heart or a major artery in terms of at least the California. Well, actually, you guys
Judicial
ship out
system.
the judicial system nationally, because I forget about that. People do ship out of state, correct? That does.
Yeah. So obviously this is LA. It's big. People come here that are wanted from places out of
Yep.
state. Yes. So we do. But to your point is, yes, we're a major artery, and all we do is kind of do this. But I think that what we could do, honestly, is be much more involved in the outcome. I think that we have chosen to just be this hub. We hold everybody. We house them. We transport them. We feed them. We keep them safe. But it's our hub. Let me just ask you this. I mean, in terms of LA County Sheriff's Department, it's our house. If somebody came into your house and your home, wouldn't you want to make sure that they're a good person? Would you want to make sure that they're, you know what I mean, that they're taking something away that's going to make them better? So I think, again, we have a great opportunity to be a part of, positive results. And that's where I say, law enforcement's antiquated. We just keep doing the same thing we've been doing for decades.
How do they define success for someone who's like in crisis? Like primarily, I'll ask this more for mental health, because I think with, also with substance abuse, it gets a little nuanced, because you have people who are on substance abuse who are committing robberies and stuff like that. But there's also people who are psychotic on the streets. Maybe something happens, they break a window, whatever, they end up kicked up, they're back in LA County. How do they define success for those cases? Primary mental health, even primary substance abuse though too.
And that's my point. I don't know that we really are. So if we are to define it, if there is a definition, it would have to be kind of like one of what we call a step down. So if you're in significant mental health crisis and you're what we call a high observation inmate, right? And let's just say you're on the 7th floor of Twin Towers and you just came in. you're not level, you maybe haven't been on your meds, you're in psychosis, these kind of things. Part of that time there is getting you what you need, right? To get you out of that state. And depending on when that is, we may move you down to the 6th floor. And you continue to get treatment, you continue to get medication mainly, you continue to get, diagnosis and, okay, this is what we are. And then maybe you can move down to the 5th floor, right? Where your observation level becomes less and less and less. So I'll give you an example. Some of our highest of observations, we can't even give them clothes. We give them what we call a wrap, which is a very thick thing that can't be torn. It can't be ripped. It can't be, shredded and made into, some type of
contraband,
weapon, any contraband or something where you can hurt yourself. And then maybe you eventually, graduate and step down to where, okay, now we can give you, a set of jailhouse, jumpsuit. That is kind of the level of what they might consider success, or that might be what they track.
Within the system.
System.
There's nothing about, see you next week, maybe.
Once we let you out, we may give you a pamphlet, say, here, go get these resources. The court may order you to go and check in here, check in there, or part of your release, instructions are that you have to, meet a certain level of requirements. But the sheriff's department as a whole, I don't think that they're looking at that and saying, okay, you didn't come back, that's a negative outcome. Because what they're doing is they're kind of releasing you. If you come back, we're just tracking, okay, where do you go? Where do you get housed? What level are you on? That's what they're really tracking.
Interesting. It's interesting because in our field, like straight primary mental health, no law enforcement, substance abuse, there's an actual term for this called door to door. Like if they're like, we have a guy discharging from a psychiatric facility. Actually, we actually have a guy I'm working with right now he's in Twin Towers. He's getting discharged from there. We pick him up from Twin Towers and ensure that he gets into the program, communicate with the lawyers, stuff like that. But it sounds like most of the time, unless it's a family who has resources or stuff like that, that's typically not going to happen because that's imposed on this individual anyways, their families like that. The court, though, is not, they didn't mandate it for me. Now that I'm thinking about it, they didn't mandate that for me. They were like, hey, you can go do this. I got let out on work released. And they had me at the, the horse stalls over by Griffith Park.
Oh, yes.
The police horse stalls. They had me over there. And I just ended up doing drugs again. And they kind of bait and switched me. They let me out of the dorm. I was in Baker 3400.
Okay.
They put me in a general pop dorm after that. And then they were like, I was 6 days in on a 6-month sentence. This is 2005 or 6.
Okay.
And you know how that is. I'm no violent, no priors, except a bunch of drunken publics. I'm out, They send me down to release. And then they're like, hey, guess what? You guys actually aren't being released. So psychologically, you're already like, I'm getting out. They're like, you guys are all getting work release, or you can go back upstairs. Listen, even if you're gonna, no matter what, there wasn't a guy in that holding pod that was like, oh yeah, let me go back upstairs. Even if they thought they were gonna get out in 24 hours and never had to do the 15 or 30 days work release.
Right.
So it's just when you're talking about it, I'm just like briefly remembering my own experience and thinking about, hey, they were just like, we just need to process this person through the system. Like whatever happens, you're an adult, figure it out. Which to some degree I actually understand, but I think there's a large subset. I mean, you do remember deinstitutionalization? It was probably even before. How old are you, if you don't mind me asking?
55.
So what year are you born?
69.
That was right around when it happened, no? The 60s or the 50s? When did deinstitutionalization happen? Reagan? No, but was it Reagan or before?
Reagan would have been in the 80s, yeah.
I think it was before. When they shut down all the insane asylums.
That was, I remember it happening in the 80s. It may have happened before then that I don't remember, but I do remember because in Norwalk, there was a very big, psychiatric hospital, and I kind of remember when that was closing and shutting down.
Yeah, and part of it is I feel like this is when you start talking about LA County Jail, and I've heard this, even when you brought it up multiple times, it's the biggest psychiatric facility in the country. which is truly a byproduct of deinstitutionalization. Let me see. What?
Yeah, it started in the 50s.
That's why I said 50s. Yes.
To go.
It kept kicking more and more and more.
And now we're paying for that in
Right.
25 pretty heavily. Is there any way back to that?
I think that's where we need to go, to be honest with you. And when you say any way back to that, this is what I ask people all the time. Can you tell me where the nearest police station or jail is? Everybody can say yes.
Yes.
Can you tell me where the nearest mental health resource is in your community?
No one knows. Yes.
No one knows. So the question is, do we need it? Yes. Does it need to be public knowledge? Yes. Do families need to know where they can get, help for their loved ones if they're in crisis? Yes. But here's what everybody knows what to do. Call 911.
Uh-huh.
And I think that it's even more to it than that, because here's the thing. They know when they call 911, the police are coming and there may be a use of force.
An incident.
And somebody's probably going to go to jail, right? And they're not going to see their loved one for a while. So here's my theory on what happens based on the people that I've talked to, the calls I've been on. I'm in mental health crisis. My family knows that I have a diagnosis. They know that I'm not really taking my medicine, but they keep trying to intervene. They keep trying to help me. They keep trying to do interventions. They keep trying to get me to go to different places, right? And then I'm not doing it, or maybe I do it a little bit here, a little bit there. Maybe I get a little better for a little while, but then I digress again. So what happens is this is an ongoing thing. And here's why. Number one, there's no place for them to call to get a mandatory kind of help.
Mm-hmm.
Number two is we don't want to call law enforcement this early because they're going to come and take our family. Mm-hmm. So what ends up happening by default? We let it keep going and going and going until it gets to be, a crisis.
Mm-hmm.
And then we call law enforcement because we have no other choice.
Yeah.
Right? So now, whereas somebody could have intervened here, had they had comfort, had they felt that law enforcement was going to be there to help, that law enforcement was going to be there and intervene, but they wait until it gets here, and now it's critical.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just kind of the nuts and bolts of it. I think that that's part of the problem. Education, resources, and then who do you call at 3 o'clock in the morning?
Yeah, and I think those educations and that education and resources also help shift, for lack of a better way of saying it, like the modus operandi for how the departments have been operating, because the public perception of that, how much different would it be if there was the belief system that, oh, this could actually provide a diversion situation for us to help our schizophrenic son, who we would rather just shelter in the basement right now because we don't want to worry about him getting assaulted, maced, right, some traumatic incident, because we know he's probably going to lash out as soon as he sees uniforms.
Right.
Yeah, interesting. What do you think about those who think that diversion is like being soft on crime? And I hear this quite frequently. I did a drug diversion program. It actually kept me out of jail the first time. Right. So, and to be frank, it was actually helpful because when I actually needed help, those counselors were still there,
Got it.
even though they kind of knew I had more research I needed to do. What do you think about that? Like people who believe that, hey, diversion programs are just, you guys are just being soft on crime, or?
I think those are people that are just not educated. I think that they have a very superficial view of what true help is. And it's funny you asked that, because just the other day, I was on social media and somebody showed a video, and just a brief description. The video was a police officer holding a guy down, pretty much using some jujitsu, what we call ground tactics. And he's holding the guy down and he's just controlling him until the guy literally just gets worn out physically. He gets gassed and help gets there and they're able to, handcuff the guy. Now, as soon as they handcuff him, you can hear in the video, somebody's videotaping, and he's talking about kind of tiny robots, you know what I mean? And some of the comments were it's funny. Some of the comments were like, this guy just needed his head bashed in. So you had a lot of people that were obviously
fueling
law
it.
enforcement that were saying, great job. People that are understanding the fact that we don't want to hurt you. We understand you're in a crisis. The best thing we can do is hold you down. I don't need to hit you with a stick. I don't need to punch you, right? I don't need to slam you on the ground. But then you had, and it's funny, it was on LinkedIn. So it's funny because I'm looking at, LinkedIn tells you what profession they are, and the guy saying bash his head in, he needs his head bashed, he disrespected police. I'm looking at him like, you're like a production manufacturer.
Yeah, you don't even know what it don't have no clue what it's like to work with this population at all.
No idea whatsoever. Other people saying stuff like he needed a billy club. And I'm looking at it like, warehouse worker. And so I really think it's just ignorance.
Yeah.
It really is. To people say that it's being soft on crime, because the reality of it is this. What is the goal? If the goal is to just feed our jails and our prisons, sure, I could see you're saying it's soft in crime. But if the goal is to not keep paying taxpayer money, you know what I mean? To keep feeding, funneling, going through this system, and to get help that reduces the recidivism, it's a no-brainer. It's common sense. It really is. And I look at a lot of times when we have people in our custody, all we really look at is the criminal act that they committed. It might be theft. It might be an assault. Sometimes it could be a violent assault. And we never look at the why. We never look at the what caused it. We never look at the agitated delirium, of repeated and drug use just over and over and over. We never look at the mental health crisis about, did I assault Chris because I don't like Chris? Or did I assault Chris because I thought he was going to harm me? I thought he was somebody else. Whether it was an alien or an animal, you know what I mean? Or there's that schizophrenia that's going on that's creating this unrealistic fear. So did I really assault? I mean, in other words, was my intention to really hurt you, or did I really think I was protecting myself?
Yeah.
And I go to this.
Intent's a big thing also in your world too.
Intent, yes,
Intent
it is
huge.
And a lot of times you don't get to intent, and you don't get to that till you get to the court, which could be months,
years,
sometimes later.
Yeah.
So what is? Yeah, it's those people that think that treating the cause or treating the trauma is soft on crime. I just really think that's ignorance. And when I say ignorance, I don't mean stupidity. I mean not knowing.
Yeah. No, I
think
agree.
there are people that haven't been educated on, what goes behind various, reasons that anybody does anything.
Yeah. Well, and I think also what intertwines it is a lot of these topics start being politicized. Like it becomes a right-left thing.
Right.
And there's an element of it where what I'll speak on right now is both elements have truth to them. There's an element where people get concerned that people utilize their trauma as a rationalization and justification to continue traumatizing other people. Maybe when we talk more in the substance abuse category, I'm not speaking on thought disorders, schizophrenia, stuff like that, but there's which would be deemed like the conservative group of people who are like, you're just giving them an out because they get to pull the mental health card.
Right.
And then on the other end, there's people who have like legitimate, serious, traumatic issues that like actually are not being addressed, and they're not like willfully engaging in maladaptive behavior and can't get help because the other camp is like, no, this is just you rationalizing and justifying and, using that as a rationale to kind of keep engaging in maladaptive behavior. So I think this is like where when we can't really get to help, because it always becomes a left-right conservative democratic issue when it's like it's really a human issue at the end of the day, right. And assessing people appropriately. Absolutely. And having skilled practitioners who can kind of see, hey, there's certain times where, and I'm sure you've seen it in your work, you're like, I mean, I've done it myself. Pretend that I'm having like a heart situation. I did this once. My house got raided. I had a quarter pound of weed. This is back when you would get arrested for weed. Late 2000s, late 90s, 99, early 2000. I told my grandma I was having heartburn. She thought I said I was having a heart attack.
Mm.
I'm 18 years old. My grandma's 90 though. She calls. I'm in Burbank too, and this was, you know, everything that happened with Burbank police.
Burbank PD.
So all those cops, that guy Tim Stair, who was, I want to go on a thing, I couldn't stand that. I knew like all those guys because my mom was schizophrenic and they were at my house so much. Okay. She calls Burbank police. Well, our address, if you call an ambulance, and I'm sure you know this, and I think I didn't know that I didn't know it until recently, that when there's a frequent psychiatric issue or like there's a potential for violence, they send black and whites first to make sure like there's not a potential situation where if we send in a paramedic, they're going to get assaulted by someone. So the knock at the door, which I thought was the paramedics, I was like, why'd you call the things? She's like, oh, the paramedics are coming, was the police. Well, I'd smoked a blunt. They opened the door. They're like, hey, I tried to close the door and they're like, nope. Right. And then they sit, and then I did this thing where I was, oh, I need the ambulance. I started doing this fake thing. It's a funny story to think about. I started faking this whole thing, and I'll never forget this. I'm sitting there and they have me doing whatever, the EKG thing and stuff, but they're in my room. The cops are. And they found a 1/4 pound of weed, but I wasn't in there. I'm sitting in the living room, and I'll never forget. I'm sitting there. The police officer comes into my kitchen, tells the firefighter who's next to me, he's all, come over here. He's all, get him outside. And I was like, okay, I'm going to jail.
Right.
You know, I digress. I just thought about that story. I was thinking about how people fabricate mental health or physical issues. Right. And like that cop was like, no, bro, like you're going to jail. You shouldn't have had drugs on you. You know what I mean? And I think there's an element of that where people get anxious that like, hey, are these people over leveraging your mental health issues and stuff like that? So,
and I'm sure there's plenty of examples of both.
There are. That's what I was saying. It's middle. It's nuanced.
It's nuanced. Yeah.
It's nuanced. What was that? Is drug? So I was online recently, like a couple weeks ago. I got a part of this thing. It's in California. Is drug court drug diversion program still a prominent thing that's being utilized? I found a website for it. It seems like it exists. I see a lot of mental health diversion. Don't see very much drug diversion anymore. So I'm wondering, is that something still around? And if so, do you feel like either of these systems, mental health or drug diversion courts, are working?
So, you know, drug diversion is still out there. It's still, you know, available. It's not as prominent as it once was. You know, it was big media, big, you know, highlight for a period of time. To my extent, do they work? Yes and no. They have, in my opinion, have been used not equally across the board in different communities. You know, different socioeconomic communities may get jail time and some may get higher, you know,
incarceration
economic,
rates.
You know, may get diversion. If I could say anything, I would say, you know, crack cocaine and powdered cocaine show up the same way in a urine drug test. So the question is, why do they have two different outcomes in the court system? Why does one get diversion? Why does one get extensive jail time? And, you know, we're going back to when I started in the 90s and early 2000s, you know, and it has a lot to do with the socioeconomics of a community, right? So I think that diversion is a wonderful option, but it's got to be followed up. It's got to be persistent. It can't say, okay, I put you in diversion this one time and, you know, it didn't work, so now jail is the only option. You know, it's got to be a repetitive process. We got to keep going with it. And I think if we can create a system where diversion is part of the arrest, here's what I really think. If I get you out on the streets and I can take you directly to diversion, and it's part of or a alternative to some sort of jail incarceration. And we're working through this, right? We're working through this, and I'm figuring out a way to do it. In other words, we have to partner. We have to collaborate with some of the organizations and some of the resources that are out there. In other words, I'm putting you in a different type of locked facility. I'm not putting you in blues. I'm not putting you in orange.
Yep.
I'm not putting you behind bars,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm putting you somewhere where you have to stay there and you have to participate in these resources. In other words, and I hold the jail as leverage. I think, number one, we would save a lot of money. I think, number two, we would have a much better outcome overall for society. So, right now we're always in this thing about taxes. Like how much do we pay, in taxes? So, let's be smart. Let's be smart with, where our resources are going, and let's make whatever we're doing effective, which I don't think we've been doing a very good job of.
Oh, I wholeheartedly agree. I think you probably follow this. It was the last election season. We had a bill that went up for this.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Correct? Do you know what I'm talking about? There was a bill that went up.
I don't know the name, but yes.
I don't know the name of the bill, but either. But it got shut down.
Yes.
I was shocked. I was like literally shocked. I was like, listen, like everyone, it's an interesting social dynamic where people want more rehabilitation. But if there's anything that mirrors anything that looks like jail or a consequence or someone being held against their will, adamantly against it,
right.
Which actually doesn't, in my mind, I'm like, well, you realize when you don't vote for that, these people are going to just stay in jail,
right?
Period.
You're leaving no other option.
Yes, this is what it is. So it's interesting that we haven't been able to shift that dynamic socially, like just on a broader scale within the larger Los Angeles community or California in general, whatever, that people still don't wrap their mind or are able to rationalize that. I find it like very, very confusing. How can law enforcement take on like a better leadership role in terms of like demanding better conditions or like these diversion programs within the context of these systems?
I think really what we can do is just get involved.
Mm-hmm.
Be part of the collaborative, team that it's going to take, whether that includes giving resources, whether that includes giving, personnel hours, or, just kind of having these discussions. Here's where the sheriff's department in LA County is the largest sheriff's department in the country, right? Obviously, if LA County were to take the lead in some of these things, right, and show it to be effective, how many other sheriff departments or counties you think would say, hey, that's a great model, right? And of course, it's going to take data. It's going to take time to generate data that's going to show the, that it lowers recidivism, that we don't create it, but we help push people back into being productive, law-abiding, contributing citizens. We basically depopulate our jails, right? And again, it's about, we lower the cost to do all of that.
Yeah.
So I think law enforcement has kind of got to be able to take the lead and say, hey, we need to bring everybody together here, and we need to start these discussions, and we need to see how we can be a resource, as opposed to just being hands-off. Obviously, you guys figure it out. All we're doing here is taking people in,
housing
and
people,
moving them out and housing them.
It's housing people. It's like
And here's where I really think, Chris, it's going to be important. The reason I think it's so important on law enforcement is because we're the first responder. We are the initial contact many times. So what we do with that person upon initial contact is important. Do we take them here or do we take them to jail? And like you were just talking about, if you don't vote for this, the only alternative is jail. And you have kids?
No, I have stepdaughters.
Okay, I have stepdaughters.
You have stepdaughters.
So let's just work through this analogy real quick, right? Because here's where I think it's important to understand. The reason something happens is important. And that's what law enforcement doesn't do. It's just the facts. Just the facts, ma'am. Just the facts, right? Did this happen? Yes. Okay, here's the outcome. We put handcuffs on you, take you to jail. So just imagine this and work through this with me. If you had kids and you had, valuable items in your house and you tell your kids, hey, don't run, no horseplay. I don't want you to break this vase. And your kids run and they're horseplaying, they're not listening to you, and they break the vase. Is there going to be a consequence? Yeah. Okay. Now, let's just say that you're being a friendly dad, a fatherly dad, and you're horseplaying, you're wrestling around with your kids and you're doing things. And while you're horseplaying with them, they run into the vase and it breaks the vase. Is there going to be a consequence for them? No. Let's just say that your kid is in the house and has a seizure and falls into the vase and breaks the vase. What's going to be your main concern?
You're not even thinking about the vase.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So my point is, just because the vase gets broken, there's not just one outcome. There's not just one consequence for that. And we need to work through those various levels. Number one is, yes, the vase got broke. And if you just broke the vase because you're not following the rules, and I've said this long ago, ever since Cain and Abel, the very beginning of time, there's been evil in the world.
Always.
And so if you're just that person and you're just, defiant and you break the vase, there's a consequence, right? If there's a contributing factor to breaking the vase, it's not the same.
Mitigating
circumstance. Now, the last thing is, if there is a medical and emergency, we shouldn't even care about the vase.
Yeah.
We should care about the person and getting them help. Right? And so what we're doing right now in law enforcement is we're giving the same thing to everybody. And the care about the person part, I think, is being missed. Now, we're trying to get there. But we're just not there.
Did you see, I think it was in Dallas, it was right after all the George Floyd stuff popped off and everything was like anti-police, but also reform stuff popped off. I'm pretty sure it was Dallas, where they started putting social workers in the police cars. Did you hear this?
I don't know if it was Dallas.
It might not have been Dallas. It maybe wasn't Dallas.
Yeah, it might have been Austin. And yeah, there's a couple of key things that happened after that, but yes.
What's your thought process about that? Because I go, that could go one of two very dramatically different ways.
Right.
Yes.
I
don't because in my mind I go, there's two schools of thought with that too. There's certain situations that I go, hey, that could be like a real danger to a social worker. So I think I think sometimes when we're looking in media and stuff like this, I used to go to, I'll use this as an example. I used to go to this BIPOC meditation group. And I intentionally went to it to challenge my own belief system, because I'm like, hey, I want to hear what these I'm a little bit more, after George Floyd stuff happened, just speak plainly on my own position. I felt like I was a little bit more conservative. But I would say I'm center left in California. Center right in California, center left everywhere in the country. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense.
I think I just had a little bit more reverence for law enforcement and stuff like that, because of my own experience with my mom going. There were times where cops drove me to school because my mom was being taken to a psych ward and my grandma couldn't get me because she was going to the hospital with my mom. Weird stuff like that. So I think I had a mixed bag, even though I had a checkered past. And where was it? I lost my train of thought. What was I talking about?
Asking if social workers in the car were...
Oh, but I was thinking because the training for both has different political undertones, in terms of one would be viewed maybe more conservative, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, you take accountability, responsibility, and then the other being maybe a little bit more progressive and liberal. How do we figure out how to blend these things? Because neither of them is completely wrong. Now, there's some belief systems that are totally far out there. How do we blend it to where there's this happy medium? And how does something like that how does that work? How do you integrate? Because when I look at it, I'm sorry, I'm trying to string this thought together, but when I look at it, when I see police officers, who always showed up for my mom? It was always cops first. 5150 hold, All of You Hospital. I can't tell you how many times I've been to All of You Hospital. It was always police that showed up and got my mom out of the house. There was rare times the pet team would come out I'm very familiar. I knew Renee when her name woman was Renee, redhead. I knew her on a first name basis. There were times where they would come get her, but sometimes that wasn't your pet team. Early 90s, you could be waiting 8 hours.
Right.
Maybe now it's faster. But in my mind, I go, how do you blend those two worlds? Because the way I view it, in my experience dealing with law enforcement, you guys are law enforcement. Sometimes you're a paramedic. Sometimes you're a therapist. Sometimes you're conflict resolution. Sometimes you're a negotiator. Sometimes you're a pastor. And which hat do I have on at what point? And at different points, you're navigating all 4 hats based on all the parties involved.
Absolutely.
Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
So how do you think we even get to the point where you guys can be effective in your job? Because majority of the calls you guys are getting pulled out, usually don't actually, law enforcement didn't need to be there. We needed a different resource to be there to help my mom, but couldn't get it.
Right. Man, you touched on so many things right there, Chris. Listen, for one is this, the mindset of, you got to pull yourself up by the bootstraps. We have to ask, do they even have bootstraps to pull out? That's the first question.
Agreed.
Because there's a lot of times it's like, pull yourself up by wait, I don't even have boots. You know what I mean? So how do I do that?
I don't have socks.
So you're right. Yeah. So, again, it can't be a one response, one fix across the board for everybody. We have to look at individual situations. And man, you are so right. Because listen, I started this job. I had just turned 23 years old. Right?
It's right when I got sober, ironically.
Awesome. Congratulations on that, by the way.
Thank you.
And congratulations on 17 years.
16, but it'll be 17 next April.
I love it.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to be there. You're going to be there. But I was 23 years old, and I'm going to domestic violence calls, family dispute calls. And guess what I'm doing? I'm not married. I don't have any kids. And I'm trying to solve a married couple's problem in about 10 minutes that they've been having for 20 years. Right?
Yep.
So I'm being that mediator. I'm being that conflict resolution person. I'm trying to be a social worker. I'm going and I'm talking to kids, and parents are calling, hey, can you talk to my son, my daughter? They're hanging out with the wrong crowd. They're doing this. And so you're trying to be a counselor. All of those things. But I can tell you, I distinctly remember, and this is going to cross over to make sense when I get through it. I distinctly remember in the 90s that when we came across a situation where there was a family with a small child and people had to be taken in custody, or there was neglect, or there was some type of abuse, I used to be able to call DCFS, their hotline.
Yeah.
And you would call them, and at 1 o'clock in the morning, somebody would answer the hotline, say, what do you got? We tell them what we have. Okay, stand by. And within 5 or 10 minutes, somebody would be calling you, and it would be the on-call DCFS social worker. They would call you, get the information, and say, okay, I'm on my way. I'm 45 minutes, I'm an hour, whatever the response time is, right? And they would show up. As time went on, I remember with that 45 minutes to an hour became 2 hours. I recall that 2 hours becoming 3 hours. I recall calling the hotline and somebody saying, I'll be there in an hour. And an hour and a half later, we're calling back and saying, hey, nobody showed up. Okay, it's going to be another hour. And I actually recall that 1 o'clock in the morning time when it evolved into somebody would be there an hour and a half, 2.5 hours later, they're calling, they'll be there in an hour and a half, we're 3 or 4, and now they show up at 7, 8 o'clock in the morning. I believe that is because, number one, resources, right? They were overworked. They had caseloads that were too large. They may have been out on other calls, attrition. The reality of it is this. There is not especially, 15, 20 years ago, there's not a 24-hour response from a large cadre of PET team or mental, what we call the MET team, mental evaluation team. I remember in the mid-2000s, countywide, I'm going to ask you this, how many MET team deputies you think we had?
Well, for me, what I would expect is 500 plus, 1,000. County's big.
Yeah,
you know,
4,400 square miles.
Yeah, and then you go on top of that, 4,400 square miles, and then I'll probably never forget that since you said that. Then I think about how many people have psychiatric. 4?
Oh, I'm waiting for you. Just keep talking, but
How many
I'm just holding it up.
how many psychiatric cases there are per day? Yeah, I would think 500 plus. 4.
And then it went to 6. And they thought that was a great improvement. And what I'm telling you is that if I'm at South LA Station, I'm at Century Station, where I work kind of in these central, LA areas, and we wanted to call the Met team because we knew that there was something going on with a mental health crisis. We were calling them, and if there's 4, they can't work 24/7. And if there's 4, some of them have to have a day off. So that really means that maybe sometimes there were 4 on duty because they overlapped. Maybe sometimes there were only 2 on duty. And maybe they're in Palmdale, Lancaster, and I'm down here in off of, Imperial and Alameda.
Mm-hmm.
Now, first of all, they're not even finished doing what they're doing in Lancaster.
Mm-hmm.
They're still on a call. So what's the time that it's going to take? And the reality of it is most people that go to school to be psychologists, most people that go to school to be social workers, they did not go to school and plan their career around working midnight to 6 a.m. in the morning at nights.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to be in the office. I'm going to work my 9 to 5, my 8 to 4, whatever it is. And I might be on call for a few hours afterwards if, you need a referral or something like that. But they're not the ones that are going to be getting up out of the bed. But law enforcement is rolling around 24/7, 365, right? We never sleep. Every Christmas, every New Year's, every Easter, every Thanksgiving, they're always out there. So it makes sense that one of 2 things could happen. We could make sure that there is a resource of psychologists and social workers, mental health workers that work graveyard.
Mm-hmm.
County has Department of Mental Health.
Mm-hmm.
LA
DMH.
County has their own department
Mm-hmm.
of mental health, right? DMH. Now, there may be some that are on duty inside our institutions, but has the county given them cars, given them phones, giving them the resources to be out driving around waiting for that call? No. The reality of it is it's law enforcement, it's the fire department, right?
Yep, always.
So that's number 1. I think, until we get a 24-hour type of response out there, we won't be effective. So how do we do that? I think we collaborate. We get people that want to do the work. We get people that want to do the job. And for now, we do put them in cars with cops. But they have to be cross-trained. Just as we're talking right now, and the topic right now is better training our law enforcement officers on how to recognize, how to respond to people with behavioral health, mental health, substance abuse, whatever it is. We also have to be training our social workers or psychologists what it means to
be a
be
police
safe.
officer.
To get in that black and white and to be safe, to know that you're going into, you can't just sit back in the car and wait until everything is calm, because man, when I tell you, when it comes to, you were in the county jail system, you've seen cell extractions.
Yes.
People refuse to come out of the cell, right?
Yeah.
Well, now we have to have medical on standby. We have to have clergy on standby, and we have to have psychological, mental health, DMH, to come. And we have to go through all of those tiers before
we extract.
But here's one of the things. Well, it's not safe. When you get it safe, let me know.
And then I'll send clergy out.
Well, not only that, but the mental health. So it's like, well, when you can calm him down, but that's what you're here for. You're here to be part of that process. And what they want to do a lot of times is just, no, it's not safe. I don't want to go in there. So we have to get people that want to do it, that understand the need, and we have to train them so that they have the confidence to do it as well. So it's a mixed bag.
Well, and it's interesting that you brought that up, because I think it might be one of the most poignant points that people, like, it's very easy to vilify. And being in county jail, I've seen the way some inmates act out, and you're like, oh yeah, then they show the picture of the inmate beaten, and it's like, well, you didn't see the piss and shit that they threw out the cell and XYZ that was going on before and yada, 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 yada. And it's interesting when you bring that up because it's very how nuanced these situations are. Even what you're talking about actually lends credibility to what I said my experience was, where the police show up at my house for a medical call, but they're not. I'm flagged. My house is a 5150 known address. They're always sending a black and white first out there because they go, you guys got to clean up the mess first. And we're like, and then on some of those calls, you're like, well, we actually didn't even need to be out here. We just need, okay, guys, you're good to go in.
Right.
We're out of here.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And it's interesting. You know, I actually had plans that I think could, you know, that are serviceable, that, you know, could be productive and impactful. Again, you have to be kind of the leader. You have to be open to it. You know, you have to be wanting to do it. But I think just like we have MET teams that are countywide, and I'm speaking of the sheriff's department, but I'm going to include, you know, LAPD because we're countywide and we can always go and assist another agency. You know, I worked at South LA Station, Lenox Station for many years. You know, part of that service area is the unincorporated part of Gardena. So maybe Gardena PD doesn't necessarily need this, but if LA County has it at South LA Station, they can call on us, just like a helicopter. You know, not every police agency has a helicopter.
A lot of them share, actually.
They do. Yeah. They contract, and hey, if it's something big, hey, can you send your helicopter and fly over us? And sure. And we patch into their radio, and we do that. Same thing. We need, number one, a partnership. I think we need collaboration. I think it's a good thing to put a social worker, a mental health worker in the car, but they both need to be trained because it's one thing to put them in a car, but it's another thing where they know how to communicate with each other. They should both be seeing the same things and understanding and knowing when there needs to be a pass off. In other words, mental health workers like, hey, I've gone as far as I can. I got to pass this on. We've crossed the line. You know, I can't do any more. Same thing with, you know, a deputy sheriff. Hey, you got first crack at this. I need to stay back, but I'm here to support because I've had the training. I know some of the things. You know, we change their posture. You know, maybe we don't put them in a black and white. Maybe we put them in an unmarked car. You know what I mean?
Or like a mental health unit.
A mental health unit. Yeah, we put them in something, and we tone down the uniform. You know, maybe they don't come out with everything clanking and rattling and, you know, getting out of the car, but, you know, they have a different set of tools and resources, you know, and like I said, that gun belt is not all the tools and resources that we need. We need, you know, care, compassion. We need the education. We need the mindset, you know, to want to help too. I'm sorry I didn't get off on that tangent.
No. Tangent's
but I think,
perfect.
I think it's I think that whatever agency started that and tried that, I hope it was fully supported. I hope it's still going. I see a way that, you know, as with anything, especially when it's in infancy, you know, you have these, you have the growing pains you got to go through. And sometimes if you don't get past those, you don't ever break through, you know what I mean, to get to the success part. So I would support that, and I'm for it. And I don't think it's soft on crime.
Nope.
I don't think it's soft. I think it is, you still have, you know, the ability to arrest people. We're not taking that away. We're not.
Yeah.
You know, and like I
100%.
said, and I think that there are a lot of people out there that need to be arrested, you know, based on a set of circumstances. And there's a lot of people that don't need to be arrested.
Yeah, no, that was the one thing that I was bringing up when we used to go to those BIPOC groups, and it was Buddhist. There was a conversation about jail reform. And one of the things the people said, now mind you, this is years and years, this is a decade plus of me being outside of jails. They go, well, I think we just need to be at a place where jails don't exist anymore and we get rid of them. And I go, yeah, no, I understand the utopian ideology, but that's not the world we live in. Like, I know bad people. There are people in the world who are sociopaths. They're not born with the same empathy tools that you have, compassion, who will literally hurt someone if you give them the option to.
Because
you know?
they can.
Because they can. Because they can. And even when they're incarcerated, and some of these guys aren't serving life sentences, they end up getting life sentences because once they're in there, it's war, gladiator camp, whatever you want to call it. So it was always an interesting thing to where I was like, I don't know about that. I think the whole social work, police, I think that's actually what shifts the collective consciousness, because I think a lot of social workers now have been driving some of the rhetoric at certain points, depending on different subsets. I don't want to broadly generalize all social workers, right? But I'm just saying at certain times about like police brutality, like as if this is like the predominant narrative of everything that police do or whatever it is. And I feel like if you actually had to sit for a week, a day, 2 days, especially in one of these lower socioeconomic neighborhoods that are disenfranchised, your perception might be a little bit different on like how difficult it is. Right. You know what I mean? So yeah, I was sorry. I digress too. It's part of the process.
Good. I love it.
I think you spoke to this. Let me see. I got a couple. Is there specific things I haven't touched on?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I guess probably a big topic of conversation, or what's big out there in the social media, you brought it up a few times. It's kind of like the George Floyd incident. It's probably maybe uses of force as it relates to people going through mental health crisis.
Yeah. Specifically in terms of less lethal uses of force moving forward. Are there potential options for less lethal uses of force with people who are struggling with mental health issues, or even maybe people who are engaging in some level of criminal activity? Obviously not if they have a gun or a knife or something like that, but maybe in situations like that, are there elements or intervention strategies that you know of that could potentially be more effective in terms of de-escalating or subduing these situations?
The short answer is absolutely. There really is.
It's a definite answer too.
It's a definite answer. You know, I remember I was a sergeant, and I was a sergeant that believed in training. I was a use of force instructor. And, you know, you have these things called briefings, briefing before you go out to your shift. And the briefing is supposed to be used as that collective time to talk about things, to train, to share information, to debrief maybe incidents that happen. And here's what I noticed. Most sergeants want to get in there and kind of read the briefing book. Okay, there's 4 stolen cars out there. We had this, we had that, blah, blah, blah. Okay, anybody got anything? Okay, ready, break, go. There was no real engagement. And I used to get teased. I used to, okay, hey, Strong's up today. He's got briefing. We're going to be here for 30 minutes. It's going to be a training class. Dang on, Skippy, because that's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to use that time to educate all of the young deputies that are under our watch on how to make it home safely and how to go out there and do the job effectively, the way that they're supposed to. So we had a situation where a couple of nights before, there was a person in mental health crisis. Had a knife, and let me digress. I'm sorry. Yeah. I trained on a video of a person that was in mental health crisis, had a knife, and the deputies went in there. He did come at the deputies with a knife. It was on video, and they shot and killed him, right? But there were so many things that went wrong before that. And here's the mindset of law enforcement. Hey, man, you survived. Good job. You got the bad guy. Good job, right? You didn't get hurt. Bad guy goes to jail. Good job. No, that's not the way we're taught. That's not the way we're trained, because we could have always learned something and did something different. So we talked about this, about you get a call of a mental health person with a knife, right? You should be showing up with less lethal. Mm-hmm. You should be showing up with the mindset that this person is in mental health crisis and there's maybe a way that you can help them without just shooting them, right? Mm-hmm. Short story long, we did this training, and my peers, they're talking about me. Oh, yeah, here we go. About 2 nights later, deputies get a call. This frantic young lady, teenager, had locked herself in the bathroom because her brother was in mental health crisis. He had taken the family cat and taken a knife from the kitchen and stabbed the cat up against a tree outside in front of the house, right? He goes and gets another knife, and he's coming after his sister, but he's calling her all kind of different things. It's not his sister to him, right?
Gargoyle or something. Yeah.
And and the family knows, right? The family knows he's had this mental health history, And she's telling us over dispatch, I'm locked in the bathroom. He hasn't taken his medicine. It's been like 2 weeks. He's coming after me. Send help, send help, send help. So these deputies, they get there. And of course, they listen to this call. And what happens? They grab a beanbag, right? And they grab a pepper ball gun. And they go in and they're talking to the sister through the door. Now, you're in a house, so there's angles. And, hey, where is he? He went down the hallway. I think he's in his bathroom. He's to the right of the bathroom. So they go in. Of course, you still have your lethal backup. They call the guy out. Guy comes out of a room. He's got a knife. He's not listening to their commands. He's coming towards them. He's walking down the hall. He's in a daze. Boom, boom, boom. They hit him with the stun bag. They hit him with the bean bag. He drops the knife. He falls. They go handcuff him, and they get him out. Nobody's dead. Nobody's hurt. And then deputies or watch commanders praise him. And he says, hey, Sergeant Strong just had that briefing the other day, and we were thinking about that as we were responding to the call, right? Now, while all my peers are laughing at me, right, teasing me, because they just want to hurry up and clear briefing. Why? Because probably they don't know how to do any real training. They're not real good at public speaking. They're nervous, whatever it is. Now, guess what they all want to start doing every briefing?
Training.
Hey, let's watch a video.
Yeah,
hey, let's train this,
training.
And that's okay. That's what we want.
Small impact on the culture echoes. It's the ripple effect.
Absolutely. So, that's a real life story, or win that I can speak to among with many others. But I look at a lot of videos, and I get called upon to kind of evaluate different sets of circumstances as a force expert. I've been a consultant for news, media, and so forth. And they say, hey, is there another way that this could have been handled? And you see a guy, you've seen it on the news, I'm sure.
Multiple times.
Guy that's in the middle of the street with no shirt on, pair of shorts or a pair of jeans, maybe naked. He's got a knife. He's got a screwdriver. He's got a crowbar. He's breaking out windows. He's going after people, and the police pull up. Stop. Put the knife down. He comes towards them. They shoot him. First of all, why'd you pull up? If he's in the middle of the street and there's nobody in harm's way right now, use distance. If you know there's a guy in the middle of the street naked with a knife, that should tell you something right there. That might be the first thing that you want to pay attention to. Why am I rolling up lights and sirens, making a lot of noise, agitating the situation? And why am I rolling up as the first person there if I don't have less lethal or if I'm by myself? So there's a lot of different tactics and things that we could do a lot better, and why am I getting out of the car?
Yeah.
How fast can this guy run? If I come up in the middle of the street and I got maybe my lights on, you know what I mean, or whatever, I have that car. I got reverse, I got drive, I can get away, I can back up. Got the radio, I got the megaphone, telling people to get off the street. There's a lot of different things that I could do different. And my biggest issue at law enforcement is the officer that shoots that guy coming at him with a knife is absolutely more than likely legally justified. But there's a big difference about what we can do and what we need to do. And because the policy or the law gives us the ability to do it, doesn't mean that that's just the only option to do it. So use of force is big. It's huge. It creates a lot of liability. It damages families. It damages communities. Especially, and let's get away from the use of force terminology. Lethal force. Law enforcement kills somebody. That family is impacted for generations. Right?
So is the force.
The force is, they're going to get sued and they're going to pay out. That individual officer, depending on who they are, depending on their mindset, may have to deal with that, for the rest of their career and the rest of their life. Then guess what? They take it home to their family. PTSD. Now their family's suffering. So it has so many facets that we don't even think about, that we don't even really touch. We just look at the incident. Boom, hey, the guy had a knife. Hey, man, he deserved it. That's what you get on the comments. Or people asking, why did you have to shoot him? Why couldn't you shoot him in the leg? Couldn't you shoot the knife out of his hand? No, that's not the way they're trained. Can they be trained that way? Maybe. But why didn't we just have the resources and the tools and the proper response? And that doesn't guarantee a favorable outcome. But what it does is it increases the opportunity and chances for a favorable outcome and decreases the fact that lethal force was the only option.
100%. Someone gets to go home and maybe they get access to the support services that they need, because if they're naked in the streets, there's probably something else
That's
going on.
that's like key number one. That's like flag number one, right?
What is your vision for like the next generation of officers? Like with this change, like you have a vision of like a different system, a different modus operandi of how things are done. What is your vision for what that looks like?
Wow, that's a deep question. So first and foremost is not having to backtrack, right? If I could say, wave a magic wand and say, what could we do to make things better? Number one is that we have to care at the very beginning. They have to come out of the academy with a high level of training in dealing with mental health and dealing with substance abuse and recognizing these kind of things. It can't even be something that they just get while they're on patrol training after the academy. I think it has to be multiple building blocks of education. That's really what it comes down to me. We have to educate people, and we have to educate our law enforcement personnel on how to recognize certain things. The other thing is, and I've always thought about this, and I'm going to digress for a minute. I had a young deputy one time bring me a report about a young girl who had been basically sexually molested by her grandfather. And he brought me this report, and if you know anything about those kind of cases, they're very in-depth. There's a lot of work that needs to go into it. And he brought me a report that was maybe about a page and a paragraph long. And that's just laying, hey, my name is Officer so-and-so, today's date and time. I responded to this location based on this radio call. I mean, that's going to take up half a page right there. So in other words, he put no effort into this report, because guess what he wanted to do? Just want to get off. I'm going to give it to the detective, let them figure it out. So he gives me this report. And so I look at it, and I'm like, man, there's nothing here. Did you go and do any investigation? Did you go and try to get her clothing? Did you, push for more answers? Did you talk to her sister, her mother, the grandfather, any of these things? Well, no, because you know what? She was kind of, laughing and smiling and this is what he told me. He says, well, and the mom, she was more concerned that, the dad had kicked them out because they were living there and she doesn't have a place to stay right now. And she didn't really take it seriously. I said, how well do you know this little girl? She says, I don't. Well, how do you know how she responds when she's nervous or scared? Does she cry? Does she laugh? Does she smile? Does she put her head down? Does she tap her foot? I don't know. So how are you going to judge whether or not she's laughing or smiling, what that means? I said, now let's talk about the mom. This little girl went and told her mom that her mom's dad had been touching her, and the reason the little girl told was because he was starting to look at her little sister. I said, how do you know that the mom didn't go through this very same thing as a kid? And she knows what she exposed her daughter to, but she thought she was doing the right thing. She wanted a roof over their head. So I said, this is what I want you to imagine. I want you to imagine you go home. So where do you live? He says, I live in Anaheim. So you go home. Your wife says, baby, there's something I got to tell you. I want you to sit down. It's important. I found out that one of our family members has been touching our daughter. And he told me he had a daughter. Right? He said, but babe, don't worry about it. I took care of it. I went to Anaheim PD and I reported it. And she gives you this report for your daughter. How would you feel? And literally, this young deputy, eyes started watering up. And he got emotional. He said, I wouldn't be happy at all. I said, so why would you do that to somebody else? That's what I think we need in law enforcement. Right now, the basis, the bane of law enforcement still to this day is us, them. And until we say it's all of us, it's we will continue to have poor responses, because if I can't look at you as my brother, my uncle, my nephew, my son, and want to treat you that way, I'm always gonna, for the most part. I mean, there's people with different levels of character, yes, but I'm not gonna treat you the way that you should be treated.
Yeah.
So I think for me, education. I've always had a vision about an academy, right, where we run scenarios where every scenario that they're looking at, it has to be one of their family members and how would they want their family members treated.
Yeah.
We need to build compassion, but what we do is we break down. Listen, law enforcement is trained to be robots. Don't feel, don't react, just the facts, and we need to get away from that, right? Those are the two key things, because everything right there, if you ask me, what we need to be successful in this profession, we learned it in kindergarten. Say please, say thank you. Treat people with respect. If you treated people with respect, you wouldn't start having these excessive force. If you treated people with respect and just common courtesy, you wouldn't have all these complaints that we spend hundreds of thousands of man hours investigating, to say, oh, you cussed at somebody or you treated them bad. But my vision is education, building an absolute expectation, and it's the norm that you treat people with compassion and respect, giving law enforcement the tools that they need, to respond effectively, properly collaborating and partnering with our other community resources and agencies. It's one thing to say, hey, we're part of the criminal justice system and we partner with the courts, we partner with the DA's office, that kind of stuff. But we need to start partnering with, private industry, if that's the way to say it. You know what I mean? We need to start having contracts, because to me, a city or a county in government, limited budgets, is never going to be able to put forth the amount of resources needed. But if you start looking at some private resources, in other words, if I knew, just like we have a vendor that we buy our paper from, our photocopiers from, our weapons from, our leather gear, we have all these different vendors that are approved. If I got approved vendors or approved contracts where I can say, I'm in this area right now, I'm on, wherever we're at in central LA, and there's 3 providers within 10 miles of here for mental health, substance abuse resources that I can go to right now that's approved, contracted, I think that would make a huge difference.
Yeah.
I think it would make a huge difference.
Yeah. And DMH is trying to move in that direction. I only know because I've been researching it myself. But it's funny because if you watch the training videos on it, I'll end after this, but the training videos, they're literally this is a very difficult system to be a part of. Everything is documentation. And I'm like, you guys aren't really, you're dissuading people from joining the system right now. You're going to have to change everything that you do the way that you do it. And I'm like, I get that it's going to be difficult, but I also feel like some of the narrative should be hey, how do we help you integrate in this week? We need you. And they're saying that, but it's very much this is going to uplift your entire organization, and you should really think about whether or not you want to do this, rather than going hey, how do we figure out how to collaborate better? And I think the one good thing last thing I'll truly end on is I think some of these nuance of something you brought up was the reporting. And I think the fact that everything is now on camera with you guys and AI, I think reporting is going to be a thing where you review the report that AI prints out at the end, verify and sign off on your report, because I feel like these are the nuanced aspects that also produce burnout for officers too, right? At the end of your day ended after a 12-hour day, but you got 4 more hours of typing, so.
Right. And if I could just add one thing, because you talked about, the DMH and kind of dissuading people from, coming in and getting in that field. Recruitment in law enforcement is huge. And where I think for decades we've been doing it wrong. We're looking for the perfect person on paper, right? And do we have a couple of minutes?
We got time. It's 6:00 right now, so you got 15 minutes.
Yes.
I take off.
Oh yeah.
I'm gonna be out by 15 and lock up.
Okay.
I'll give you this real quick.
Yeah.
I'll just give you this real quick because
Give me a call on your way home.
Okay, Chris. Thank you. I'll just give you this real quick because one of the biggest issues is recruitment and how do we recruit the right people, right? And And law enforcement nationwide, recruitment's a big deal. And I have a plan. And I always thought, when I was a unit commander over our Audit and Accountability Bureau, we did a review, a performance review on backgrounds. So let me give you 2 scenarios, right? You take candidate A, who grew up in Orange County, right? Middle class, 2-parent, 2-income family. Does nothing outstanding, just a regular person, plays high school sports, stays out of trouble, goes to a local 4-year college. Parents put his name on a credit card, help him build his credit. He goes to college here, use this case for emergencies. Parents help him buy a car, they co-sign on it. He's working. If he doesn't like the job or something goes wrong, he quits. No big deal, but parents co-sign. So what's going to happen if he's late on the car note? They're not going to let that happen. They're going to take care of it for him, right? Guy pretty much just stays status quo. He gets out of college. He's got great credit. He's got a college degree. He's never been in any kind of trouble. Boom. Perfect candidate. Let's hire him. Now let's take candidate B, right? Grew up in South LA. Single parent income. Went to, let's just say, Washington High, right? Stayed out of trouble. Has been around a lot of violence, gang activity, had all types of opportunities to go down another road. Didn't. Stayed in school, graduated, and is now going to Southwest College, El Camino College, whichever one you pick, community college, right? Taking classes, taking courses. Mom, on the other hand, is pretty much just an independent contractor, a worker, so to say, whether it be, with a food truck, a fuel cart, cleaning, blue collar. Gets into a car accident and gets hurt. Now, she doesn't go to work. She doesn't get paid. She doesn't have sick time. She doesn't have a retirement system.
No mental health days.
No mental health days. Hey, her hourly rate is her hourly rate, and if she doesn't make any money, she doesn't make any money. So now the same person who bought their own car, who's paying for their own tuition, goes and gets a second job. Who's working, goes and gets a second job to help mom cover rent, right? Not only that, the little sister's prom is coming up. And what does she want for her little sister? She wants her little sister to be able to have a nice dress and go to prom, right? So what starts to falter? Her classes. Maybe her grades go down. Maybe her attendance goes down. Maybe even she withdraws or drops a couple of classes, right? In order to help pay the rent and help her little sister go to prom, she is late on her car note twice. Never gets repossessed, but the car note, is late 2 times. She goes and applies for the sheriff's department. What do they say? Oh, look at you. You got bad credit. You have no finality. You don't finish your classes. You don't do this. You don't do that. Disqualified. If you ask me, who's a more responsible person that's dealt with some adversity? Who's the person that I want going and talking to people with some compassion and some understanding? There's a lot of candidates out there that are candidate B that would be much better at this job
100%
than the perfect, ideal paper candidate, but that's who law enforcement always wants to hire.
Resilience.
So to your part about dissuading people, a lot of people don't even apply because they figure, I'm not going to get it.
Yep.
I'm not going to make it, right? We need to change that narrative, and we need to change it quickly. So that was it. I just wanted to
I appreciate it. I mean, you get me going off on a trance. Like when you start talking, I envision it. It's real. I appreciate you coming out. Like this was awesome.
Appreciate
it was easy.
the time.
That was like I told you. It's like boom. You start. It's over with. He's like,
Absolutely.
Hey, we gotta get out of here. So
I know.
yeah. Thank you.
Jordan's over there like, hey man, get out of here. I gotta go.